The most recent confrontation between Iran and Israel marks a significant escalation in a long-standing shadow war that has unfolded over decades. While the animosity between the two nations is deeply rooted in ideology, politics, and regional power struggles, the events that triggered this latest flare-up are both immediate and calculated. According to verified intelligence reports and multiple regional sources, the immediate catalyst was an Israeli airstrike in Damascus, Syria, on a building reportedly used by Iranian military advisors affiliated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. The attack, which resulted in the deaths of several high-ranking Iranian officers, was seen in Tehran as a direct provocation, not merely a tactical move but a strategic message. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, publicly condemned the attack, stating that the Zionist regime has crossed a red line. Within 48 hours, Iran responded by launching a barrage of missiles and drones toward military targets inside Israeli territory, while Israel's Iron Dome and advanced air defense systems intercepted the majority of these threats. The few that penetrated caused limited but symbolic damage, reinforcing Iran's capability to retaliate. This tit-for-tat exchange is not isolated. The two countries have been engaged in a low-intensity, often covert, conflict across Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and the Persian Gulf. Israel has consistently targeted Iranian weapons shipments and military positions in Syria to prevent entrenchment near its northern borders. Iran, in turn, has used proxies such as Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad to pressure Israel on multiple fronts. The significance of this latest exchange lies not only in its intensity but in its public visibility. Unlike previous encounters that had occurred in the shadows or were denied by both sides, this confrontation was acknowledged and broadcast. The visibility signals a shift from covert confrontation to open hostility, a dangerous development for the already volatile Middle East. Additionally, the timing is crucial. Both Iran and Israel are navigating internal political challenges. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces mass protests and deep political division at home, while Iran's leadership is under pressure due to economic sanctions, public dissatisfaction, and the aftermath of President Raisi's death. Some analysts believe the escalation may serve domestic purposes, creating external threats to unite their respective populations. In summary, the current crisis is the result of a mix of long-standing rivalry, immediate provocations, strategic posturing, and domestic pressures. The question remains whether this is a one-off retaliation or the beginning of a broader regional conflict. Iran's decision to openly launch a retaliatory strike on Israel marks a significant evolution in its strategic calculus. Historically, Iran has preferred to operate through proxies, most notably Hezbollah in Lebanon, various Shiite militias in Iraq, and Hamas in Gaza. By taking direct military action, Iran has not only raised the stakes but also exposed its broader objectives in the region. At the core of Iran's strategic thinking lies deterrence. The strike on Israel is as much a symbolic gesture as it is a tactical move. Tehran wants to send a clear message: any direct Israeli attack on Iranian personnel, especially high-ranking IRGC officers, will not go unanswered. This establishes a new precedent in their conflict. By retaliating openly, Iran is signaling to Israel and the world that it is no longer willing to tolerate assassinations or strategic strikes without consequence. Furthermore, this response serves to project strength at a time of internal and external vulnerability. Following the death of Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash, the regime faced a potential leadership vacuum, prompting questions about internal stability. Simultaneously, the Iranian economy continues to suffer from sanctions, inflation, and youth dissatisfaction. Demonstrating military resolve allows the leadership, particularly the IRGC and Supreme Leader Khamenei, to reinforce their control over the domestic narrative. It distracts the public from economic hardship and frames the state as a protector against foreign aggression. From a geopolitical standpoint, Iran is also testing regional and global responses. The recent thawing of diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, brokered by China, has altered the power dynamics in the region. By attacking Israel directly, Iran is observing whether its Arab neighbors will condemn or remain neutral, effectively measuring how isolated Israel has become due to its actions in Gaza and the West Bank. Some Arab governments have been cautious in their criticism, reflecting the shifting sands of Middle Eastern alliances. Iran's strike also has a deterrent function aimed at the United States. Washington remains Israel's closest ally and provider of military aid. However, the Biden administration has attempted to de-escalate tensions in the region, particularly after the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and the strategic pivot to Asia. Iran's boldness tests the limits of US commitment. If America refrains from direct involvement, Tehran may view it as a green light to increase pressure in the region. Additionally, Iran's attack serves to rally its regional proxies. Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah hailed Iran's brave response, and pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria issued statements of solidarity. This show of force could embolden these groups to act more aggressively, opening up multiple fronts against Israel. Iran may see this as an opportunity to activate the so-called axis of resistance, a network of allies that could pin down Israeli resources and attention on multiple borders. There's also an international media and diplomatic angle. Iran is adept at using moments like this to shift global narratives. The regime frames its actions not as aggression, but as resistance against Zionist occupation and Western imperialism. In regions such as Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia, this message resonates with anti-Western sentiments and earns Tehran soft power points. Despite these aims, Iran also carefully calibrated the strike. It targeted military infrastructure, not civilian areas. This suggests Tehran wanted to avoid a full-scale war while still achieving symbolic victory. The message: we can reach you, but we are not declaring war yet. In conclusion, Iran's strike was about far more than revenge. It was a strategic maneuver to reassert deterrence, strengthen domestic unity, signal regional influence, and test both Israeli resolve and international reaction. Whether it succeeds depends on how Israel and the world responds in the coming days. In the wake of Iran's direct strike on Israeli military assets, the world turned its eyes to Jerusalem, anticipating whether Israel would escalate in kind or recalibrate its strategy. For a nation long known for its doctrine of overwhelming retaliation, the response, or lack thereof, speaks volumes about Israel's current strategic thinking and the broader geopolitical context in which it finds itself. To understand Israel's reaction, it is essential to place it within the framework of its long-standing security doctrine, deterrence through decisive military superiority. Israel's past actions, from the bombing of Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor in 1981 to the extensive campaigns against Hezbollah in Lebanon, have consistently demonstrated a willingness to use force swiftly and without hesitation. However, the Iranian strike introduced a new variable, a direct attack from another sovereign state, not a proxy force. Initially, Israel's response was notably measured. The government confirmed the attack, downplayed its impact, and emphasized the effectiveness of its defense systems. The Iron Dome arrow and David's Sling anti-missile networks intercepted the majority of incoming threats, minimizing physical damage and civilian casualties. This defense success allowed Israel to claim a form of moral and strategic victory without immediately escalating into a broader war. Behind the scenes, Israeli decision-makers were grappling with a delicate balancing act. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet faced two main options: launch a retaliatory strike on Iranian territory, thus risking regional war, or apply strategic patience, consolidate international support, and respond asymmetrically through covert operations or cyber means. The choice of restraint appears to be rooted in both tactical and political calculations. Militarily, a full-scale assault on Iran would require coordination with allies, detailed targeting, and risk drawing in Iran's proxies such as Hezbollah in Lebanon or Houthis in Yemen. With the northern border already tense and Gaza still unstable, opening another front would stretch Israeli forces and resources dangerously thin. Politically, Netanyahu is facing unprecedented domestic turmoil. Massive protests against his government's judicial reforms, economic concerns and accusations of corruption have eroded public confidence. A regional war could either unite the nation or further polarize it, an unpredictable gamble in an already volatile environment. Moreover, a disproportionate response could alienate critical allies in Europe and the United States, especially amid global calls for de-escalation. That said, Israel has not ruled out a response. It has merely postponed it. Military analysts suggest that retaliation may come in less overt ways. Israel's intelligence apparatus, including Mossad and Unit 8200, may opt for sabotage missions, cyber attacks on Iranian infrastructure, or targeted assassinations of key IRGC commanders abroad. This approach maintains deterrence while avoiding immediate war. There is also the diplomatic front. Israel has used the Iranian strike to rally international opinion. It has portrayed itself as the victim of Iranian aggression, calling on the UN Security Council to condemn Tehran. While responses have been mixed, with Russia and China urging restraint, Israel has succeeded in repositioning itself in the global narrative, not merely as an aggressor in Gaza or the West Bank, but as a nation under direct threat from a hostile regime. Interestingly, voices within Israel's security establishment are split. Some generals argue that failing to respond decisively may embolden Iran and its allies, eroding Israel's deterrence over time. Others believe that the successful interception of Iranian missiles demonstrates Israel's defensive prowess and shifts the cost-benefit calculus for Tehran, thus achieving deterrence without a broader war. The reaction from the Israeli public has also been mixed. Some citizens, particularly in the south and north near potential front lines, fear an extended conflict and support the government's cautious stance. Others demand retaliation, viewing restraint as weakness. In conclusion, Israel's response, so far, leans towards strategic patience, not passivity. By avoiding an immediate military escalation, Jerusalem has bought time to assess, plan, and recalibrate. Whether this restraint holds or transitions into covert or conventional retaliation remains to be seen. One thing is certain, Israel's next move will be calculated, and its implications will echo far beyond the Middle East. The latest escalation between Iran and Israel has sent political shockwaves far beyond their borders, reverberating through the Arab world, Turkey, and the global superpower, the United States. While Tehran and Jerusalem exchange blows, regional actors are reevaluating their positions, alliances, and strategies in response to a rapidly shifting security environment. Arab nations, particularly those in the Gulf, find themselves in a precarious position. On one hand, they share deep-rooted concerns over Iran's ambitions and destabilizing activities. On the other, open support for Israel remains a politically sensitive issue due to the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially in the wake of recent tensions in Gaza and the West Bank. Saudi Arabia, which recently restored diplomatic ties with Iran in a Chinese brokered deal, issued a carefully worded statement urging both parties to exercise restraint. The kingdom's leaders are pursuing a long-term vision for regional stability and economic transformation under Vision 2030, which hinges on minimizing military conflict in the region. Riyadh is reluctant to be drawn into a direct confrontation, especially as it juggles its warming ties with both China and the West. The United Arab Emirates, a signatory to the Abraham Accords, also walks a fine line. While maintaining open relations with Israel, the UAE has been cautious not to antagonize Iran, with whom it shares significant economic and maritime interests. In private, Emirati officials express concern that unchecked escalation could derail regional investment, tourism, and diplomatic normalization efforts. Countries like Jordan and Egypt, which maintain formal peace treaties with Israel, are also watching the conflict closely. Both governments have called for de-escalation, wary of unrest spilling over into their own territories. Public sentiment in these countries remains overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian, and any alignment with Israel in a conflict with Iran risks provoking domestic backlash. Lebanon, home to Hezbollah, is in a uniquely dangerous position. If the conflict between Iran and Israel expands, Hezbollah is expected to become actively involved, potentially opening a northern front against Israel. Such a scenario would be catastrophic for Lebanon, already crippled by economic collapse and political dysfunction. Regional leaders fear that an Israeli-Hezbollah confrontation would escalate it into a full regional war. Turkey under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has positioned itself as both a critic of Israeli policies and a pragmatic power broker in the Middle East. Ankara condemned the Iranian strike while also urging restraint on all sides. Erdogan's foreign policy is often described as transactional, balancing support for the Palestinian cause with efforts to expand Turkish influence across the region. Turkey sees the conflict as an opportunity to assert itself diplomatically, perhaps mediating between the two sides or using its leverage with NATO and regional actors to gain concessions. At the same time, Turkey's own competition with Iran for regional influence from Syria to the Caucasus means it watches Tehran's military assertiveness with concern. Ankara's calculus is also influenced by its economic needs and domestic politics, facing inflation and political polarization. Erdogan is keen to avoid regional instability that could affect trade, energy routes, or refugee flows. Washington's role is perhaps the most consequential. As Israel's chief ally and defense partner, the United States is under immense pressure to support its strategic partner while avoiding a broader war that could engulf the Middle East. President Biden's administration has called for restraint from both parties and deployed additional military assets to the region, not necessarily to attack Iran, but to deter further escalation. The US is walking a tightrope. A strong response risks dragging the country into another Middle Eastern conflict, a scenario the American public is largely opposed to, especially after 2 decades of war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yet failure to support Israel robustly could undermine US credibility and embolden Iran and other adversaries. Complicating matters is the US evolving relationship with other regional powers. China's rising influence, Russia's presence in Syria, and diverging Gulf interests make it increasingly difficult for Washington to dictate the strategic direction of the region. The Biden administration is reportedly using back-channel diplomacy through Qatar, Oman, and European partners to defuse the situation. The Iran-Israel confrontation is more than a bilateral dispute. It is a regional stress test. Every neighboring nation and global power has a stake in preventing this conflict from becoming a broader war. Yet, each actor's interests are distinct, often conflicting. While many regional players are advocating for peace publicly, they're also preparing quietly for the worst-case scenario. In a region where alliances shift quickly and history weighs heavily, the reverberations of this crisis will likely continue long after the last missile falls. The Middle East stands once again at the edge of a dangerous precipice, where one miscalculation could trigger a chain reaction far beyond anyone's control. With missiles fired, threats exchanged, and global powers on alert, the most urgent question looming over the Iran-Israel conflict is what comes next. The region now teeters between 2 divergent paths, one leading to expanded war, the other offering a fragile window for diplomatic resolution. While both Tehran and Jerusalem have so far exercised measured restraint, the structural conditions underlying their hostility suggest that the crisis is far from over. The most immediate risk lies in uncontrolled escalation. Should either side miscalculate or misinterpret the other's intentions, retaliation could spiral quickly into a regional war. Iran's extensive network of proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite militias in Iraq, Houthis in Yemen, and groups in Syria and Gaza form a ring of fire around Israel. If Tehran chooses to activate this network, it could open multiple simultaneous fronts, forcing Israel into a multi-theater conflict. Israel, for its part, has repeatedly signaled that it will not tolerate Iranian entrenchment near its borders. If it feels its deterrence is at risk, it may choose to strike preemptively, not just at proxies but at Iranian assets directly, including military bases, nuclear sites, or IRGC facilities. Such a move would almost certainly trigger a broader Iranian response. Furthermore, a war between Israel and Hezbollah, which possesses over 100 Zarozan rockets, would dwarf the scale of previous Gaza conflicts. Civilian casualties, infrastructure destruction, and refugee displacement could reach catastrophic levels. not only for Lebanon and Israel, but also for neighboring Jordan and Syria. In this scenario, global powers could be dragged in. The United States would face enormous pressure to defend Israel, while Russia, with troops and assets in Syria, may seek to protect its interests and clients. China, a key trade partner for Iran and a rising diplomatic player, could be forced to step in to prevent disruption of oil supplies and economic stability. Despite the dangers, there are also emerging opportunities for diplomacy. History has shown that moments of high tension often create the urgency necessary for dialogue. The post-attack restraint from both Israel and Iran may signal back-channel communication or third-party mediation already underway. Key diplomatic actors, including Qatar, Oman, and the European Union, have experience facilitating indirect talks between adversaries. These nations could play a role in creating a temporary ceasefire or even brokering a confidence-building framework to prevent further incidents. The recent diplomatic engagement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, orchestrated by China, offers a model for what's possible even between ideological rivals. The Biden administration has also shown interest in quiet diplomacy. Though it publicly reaffirms support for Israel, Washington is wary of becoming embroiled in another Middle Eastern war. The US could push for a regional security dialogue or use its influence to de-escalate through targeted sanctions, relief, or other incentives. Even within Israel and Iran, there are constituencies that may favor a diplomatic pause. Israel's security establishment is divided on the value of continued escalation, especially given the domestic unrest and economic challenges. Iran, facing deep economic distress, sanctions, and leadership uncertainties, may prefer to avoid an all-out war that could jeopardize regime stability. Regardless of whether escalation or diplomacy prevails, one thing is clear: the regional security landscape has changed. The era of covert confrontation is giving way to more overt, high-risk engagements. Both Iran and Israel have crossed new thresholds, Iran by attacking directly and Israel by targeting high-profile Iranian operatives abroad. Future conflicts may become more public, faster-paced, and harder to contain. Nations across the Middle East are reassessing their military doctrines, alliances, and defense capabilities. Saudi Arabia and the UAE may accelerate their own military modernization. Gulf nations may also reconsider the pace of normalization with Israel, weighing the benefits of closer ties against the risks of being drawn into its conflicts. Meanwhile, the global energy market watches closely. Any protracted war involving Iran, a major oil producer, could severely disrupt supply chains and send global prices soaring. This adds another layer of urgency for international actors to prevent escalation. The Iran-Israel conflict has entered a new phase, one defined by direct confrontation, unpredictable variables, and high-stakes diplomacy. Whether the region moves toward war or diplomacy depends on the choices made in the next few days and weeks. The Middle East has seen too many missed opportunities and costly wars. Yet, even now, amid rising smoke and strained alliances, diplomacy remains a path, narrow, difficult, but still open. What lies ahead is uncertain. But what is certain is this: the decisions made today will shape the security architecture of the Middle East for years to come. The world watches, waits, and hopes that restraint prevails over recklessness. The Iran-Israel confrontation marks a defining moment in Middle Eastern geopolitics, a rare instance where two long-time adversaries have stepped out from the shadows of proxy warfare into direct confrontation. This is not just a military exchange, it is a strategic inflection point that could recalibrate alliances, reshape deterrence doctrines, and redraw the contours of power in the region. From Iran's bold strike and Israel's calculated restraint, to the silent tremors felt across Arab capitals and the nervous watch of global superpowers, the crisis has revealed both the fragility and interdependence of today's international order. Every actor, from Riyadh to Washington, Ankara to Beijing, is now reassessing its posture, its red lines, and its long-term strategic interests. What stands out most is that both escalation and diplomacy remain equally possible. The region hangs in delicate balance. One misstep, one misinterpreted signal, one rogue actor, and the Middle East could plunge into a full-scale regional war with global consequences. But the same tension also creates a rare opening for diplomacy, deterrence recalibration, and a renewed push for regional security architecture. This is not just a test of military strength. It is a test of leadership, restraint, and vision on all sides. The coming days will shape more than headlines. They will shape history.